Hi there. Thank you for being here. What you're about to hear is a deeply personal story, a story of confusion, of emotional entrapment, but also a story of awakening, of reclaiming strength, and finally, of healing. This is It Wasn't Love, my escape from a trauma bond, a survivor story. Take a breath and come with me as we step into Elara's world, where the line between love and control wasn't just blurred, it was shattered. The salt spray stung Elara's face as she stood on the windswept cliffs of Big Sur, the Pacific a churning gray beast below. The raw, untamed beauty of the coastline usually offers solace, but today, it only amplified the hollowness within her. Below the roar of the ocean, a single thought echoed in her mind. It wasn't love, it was a trauma bond. For years, she had believed in a narrative she and Julian had meticulously crafted, a tempestuous, passionate love story for the ages. They were artists, after all, living a bohemian dream in a crumbling Victorian house overlooking the sea. He, a brooding painter with a tormented soul. She, a free-spirited writer, ready to heal him with her words and devotion. The reality, however, was far more sinister. Elara met Julian at a gallery opening in San Francisco. He was magnetic, radiating an intensity that both thrilled and intimidated her. His paintings were dark, evocative, filled with swirling brushstrokes of anguish and beauty. He saw something in her, he claimed, a kindred spirit, a muse who understood the depths of his artistic soul. He showered her with compliments, declaring her his inspiration, the light that pierced his darkness. Elara, starved for validation after a string of failed relationships and a childhood marked by emotional neglect, fell hard. The early days were a whirlwind of romance. Julian filled her life with grand gestures, surprise trips to Sonoma wineries, late-night poetry readings under the stars, passionate declarations of undying love scrawled on napkins. He introduced her to his world of artists, writers, and musicians, all equally eccentric and captivating. Elara felt like she had finally found her tribe, a place where she belonged. But beneath the surface of this idyllic existence, a darkness began to stir. Julian's moods were volatile, shifting from adoration to icy detachment in an instant. He criticized her writing, her clothes, her friends, always framing it as constructive criticism, a way to help her become the best version of herself. He isolated her from her family, claiming they didn't understand their artistic lifestyle. He demanded her constant attention, flying into rages if he spent too much time on her own projects or with other people. The first time he yelled at her, Elara was shocked. They were arguing about her attending a writing workshop, and his anger escalated quickly, his words cutting like shards of glass. He accused her of abandoning him, of not appreciating his sacrifices for her. When he saw the tears streaming down her face, he immediately softened, pulling her into his arms, begging for forgiveness. He told her he was sorry, that he was just afraid of losing her, that his love was so intense it sometimes overwhelmed him. Elara, relieved and desperate to believe him, forgave him. This pattern, the idealization, the discard, and the eventual hoovering, became the rhythm of their relationship. Julian would build her up, showering her with praise and affection, only to tear her down with criticism and contempt. He would disappear for days, ignoring her calls and texts, then reappear with flowers and apologies, claiming he had been lost in his art, battling his demons. Elara was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate his moods, desperate to avoid triggering his anger. He gaslighted her relentlessly, twisting her words, denying her reality. He would say things like, "You're being too sensitive," or "You're imagining things," or "I never said that." Elara began to doubt her own sanity, questioning her memory, her perceptions, her very identity. She started keeping a journal, secretly documenting his behavior, as a way to prove to herself that she wasn't crazy. One evening, after a particularly brutal argument, Julian stormed out of the house. Elara curled up on the couch, sobbing, feeling utterly broken and alone. She reached for her journal, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. The entries painted a stark picture of emotional abuse, manipulation, and control. As she read through her own words, a wave of clarity washed over her. She finally understood what was happening. She had stumbled upon the term trauma bond while researching toxic relationships online. The more she read, the more it resonated with her experience. A trauma bond, she learned, is a deep, unhealthy attachment that forms between an abuser and their victim, characterized by cycles of abuse, intermittent reinforcement, and a power imbalance. It's a psychological manipulation tactic that keeps the victim trapped in the relationship, despite the pain and suffering. The intermittent reinforcement, the unpredictable mix of positive and negative treatment, was key to understanding the trauma bond. Julian's occasional acts of kindness and affection created a powerful addiction, a desperate hope that he would change, that he would return to the idealized version of himself she had fallen in love with. The abuse, on the other hand, eroded her self-worth, making her feel like she deserved the mistreatment. The power imbalance was also crucial. Julian held all the power in the relationship. He controlled the finances, the social circle, and the narrative. Elara felt like she had to constantly prove herself to him, to earn his love and approval. She had sacrificed her own dreams and aspirations to support his artistic career, becoming increasingly dependent on him both emotionally and financially. The realization that she was in a trauma bond was both devastating and liberating. It was devastating because it shattered the illusion of their love story, forcing her to confront the reality of the abuse. But it was also liberating because it gave her a framework for understanding what had happened, a way to explain the inexplicable. It was not her fault. She was not crazy. She was a victim of manipulation. The process of breaking the trauma bond was excruciatingly difficult. Julian did everything he could to keep her ensnared. He showered her with apologies, promises of change, and even threats of suicide. He hoovered her relentlessly, reminding her of the good times, guilt-tripping her about abandoning him in his time of need. He even stalked her for a while, showing up at her work and her friends' houses. Elara sought therapy, finding a compassionate and experienced therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. The therapist helped her to understand the dynamics of the trauma bond, to process her emotions, and to develop healthy coping mechanisms. She learned about setting boundaries, practicing self-care, and rebuilding her self-worth. She also started attending support groups for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Hearing other people's stories, realizing she wasn't alone was incredibly validating. She found strength and courage in the shared experiences of others who had been through similar situations. Slowly, painstakingly, Elara began to reclaim her life. She cut off all contact with Julian, blocking him on social media, changing her phone number, and even moving to a new apartment. She reconnected with her family and friends, rebuilding the relationships she had neglected during her time with Julian. She started writing again, pouring her experiences into her work, transforming her pain into art. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt. But Elara was determined to heal, to break free from the cycle of abuse, and to create a life of her own choosing. She learned to trust her intuition, to value her own needs, and to prioritize her own well-being. Standing on the cliffs of Big Sur, Elara felt a flicker of hope, a sense of possibility. The trauma bond had left deep scars, but it had also made her stronger, more resilient, more determined than ever before. She knew that the healing process would continue, that there would be good days and bad days. But she also knew that she was no longer defined by her relationship with Julian. She was Elara, a survivor, a writer, a woman who had found her voice and was ready to use it. Years passed. Elara wrote a novel about her experiences, a raw and honest portrayal of trauma, abuse, and healing. The book became a bestseller, resonating with readers around the world. She received countless letters and emails from people who had been through similar situations, thanking her for sharing her story, for giving them hope. She became an advocate for survivors of narcissistic abuse, speaking at conferences, writing articles, and offering support to others who were struggling to break free from toxic relationships. She found purpose in helping others, in using her pain to make a difference in the world. One day, Elara received an invitation to speak at a conference in San Francisco. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to return to the city where she had met Julian. But she knew that she had to do it, not only for herself, but for all the other survivors who needed to hear her message. As she stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd, she felt a surge of confidence. She was no longer the broken, insecure woman who had fallen under Julian's spell. She was a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of hope. She told her story, sharing the painful details of her relationship with Julian, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the trauma bond. She spoke about the importance of self-care, of setting boundaries, of seeking support. She emphasized that healing was possible, that it was never too late to reclaim your life. After her speech, a woman approached her, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Your story gave me the courage to leave my abusive relationship. I finally understand that it's not love, it's a trauma bond." Elara smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. She knew that her journey had not been in vain. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. She had broken free from the trauma bond and created a life of her own choosing. And in doing so, she had inspired countless others to do the same. Years later, Elara found herself standing on those same cliffs in Big Sur, the wind whipping through her hair. But this time, the ocean didn't feel like a churning beast. It felt like a powerful, cleansing force, washing away the remnants of her past. She was no longer defined by her trauma. She was defined by her resilience, her strength, her unwavering commitment to healing and helping others. She was free. She thought about Julian, not with anger or resentment, but with a sense of closure. She understood that he was a deeply damaged person, trapped in his own cycle of abuse. She hoped that one day he would find the help he needed to heal. But she knew that his healing was not her responsibility. Her responsibility was to herself, to her own well-being, to her own happiness. Elara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the salty air. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. She was finally at peace. She had broken the trauma bond, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever before. It wasn't love. It was a trauma bond. And she has survived. Thank you for listening. If this story spoke to something deep inside you, you're not alone. Healing from a trauma bond isn't easy, but as Elara's journey shows, it is possible. You can break free, you can rebuild, and you can write your own story, one filled with strength, clarity, and peace. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing, sharing this story with someone who might need it, or leaving a comment to let others know they're not alone. Until next time, take care of your heart, trust your voice, and remember, it wasn't love, it was a trauma bond. And you can survive it too.